A U.S. Senate committee will meet today. That's right. On Wednesday, we'll vote on whether to advance a bill that will allow the legal cannabis industry access to banking, an option the industry lobbyists have long sought. But even before the Senate Banking Committee takes up the Secure and Fair Enforcement Regulation Banking Act, nicknamed SAFER Act, some in the industry say it's not enough. They point to issues including 280E of the federal tax code, which states that businesses dealing in illicit substances cannot write off the cost of doing business from their taxes. Critics include Cody Bass, owner of Tahoe Wellness, a cannabis dispensary in Lake Tahoe, California, who said he is facing $3.4 million in back due taxes due to Section 280E. In a quote, he says, "It's really meant to put you out of business. That was the intent of Congress when they passed this in 1983. It was intended for cocaine smugglers in Miami," Bass said. The disconnect between federal and state governments is concerning for the $13.2 billion legal marijuana industry, and the federal government lists cannabis as a Schedule I drug with no potential medical uses, making it even more strictly controlled than cocaine and fentanyl. Meanwhile, 22 states have legalized cannabis either for medical or adult use purposes, and the legislation has been in the works for years. First introduced in 2013 by Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley, and the industry's pretty frustrated that we're still talking about it, said Aaron Smith, CEO of the NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association. In April 22, a poll from Pew Research found that 88% of Americans believe some form of cannabis should be legal, with 59% believing in legalization of both medical and adult use purposes. And Republican Senator Mike Rounds, a member of the Senate Banking Committee, said he continued to oppose SAFER. In a quote, he says, "I just don't think that we should be doing that we should be at this stage of the game doing things that allow for the proliferation of businesses that market cannabis in the United States," he said. "I don't see a positive to that," he says. Merkley called the 280E issue outrageous, but flagged the struggle of getting a supermajority of 60 senators to support anything cannabis related. In a quote, he says, "There's a possibility somebody may raise it when we get this bill over to the floor," he said. "The challenge we will have is what we can add to keep the coalition together in order to have the 60 votes and get a final vote," he said. And I know Gretchen's over there working on it, and I'm hearing that they're going to be introducing a buttload of amendments to this bill today, so it could potentially tank it, or it could end up floating on right into a vote in the Senate. What do you guys think? This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News Hour.
It's a little nibble at a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back and look at when this got started in the 1980s, and not necessarily started, but when Lynn Bias died and they brought in minimum mandatories and went after smugglers writing stuff off their taxes, it was at a period of time when people were pissed about law and order, and there was some crazy things happening. Now we're, 40-something years later?
Mm-hmm.
And we're still dealing with the unintended consequences of actions back in those days. And if you target it for cocaine, but anything that's illegal is going to fall within it. Now, how do you get cannabis or marijuana or whatever term they want to use out of that? And to allow banking, I mean, you have to specifically target a bunch of other things to exclude them from this legislation, or then you've got to expand it to go beyond banking. 280E is killing the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's as big a problem as banking is. You can't do one without the other. I just don't see it.
I agree with you, Dale. We definitely need some 280E relief, but we're not going to get that with a safe banking bill. Unfortunately, we would get that if they did move this to Schedule 3, but we're not going to win at all, and we're just going to hand the industry over to Big Pharma if that happens.
Oh, and exclude all the social equity applicants and anyone with a criminal record.
Yep. Anyone with social equity will not be eligible under Schedule 3 to maintain a cannabis license. That is for sure. What do you think about this, Liz? Consequences?
It's well, what it is it's so twisted. You know, these laws were made with ill intent and not in order to progress our society, but to lock up certain populations of the society. And so now we're talking about disentangling them
Mm-hmm.
and what could be if we even got a little crumb. Oh my gosh, we get so excited about the thought of having just a little more freedom around a
Mm-hmm.
plant that it's just a plant, I'm choir here, but I'm never hopeful. I mean, I think I've learned this from you, Jason. I'm really never hopeful when I see that
Yeah.
anything is happening in the Senate or that there's rumblings in the Senate.
Well,
I just don't.
you know what they say
I won't
about
hold
the
my breath.
Senate, right? You know what they
What
say
do you say
about the
about the
Senate?
Senate?
They say that is where bills go to die.
There you go. And now we're
Yep.
talking about it.
Yep.
It's
These are not good times to get anything through Congress. There's petulant pissing matches going on up there. No, no concern for the American public. They're just want to have a pissing match over something. It's hard to imagine anything's going to get done. Um, it's frustrating because those of us been in this for decades have been waiting for decades for someone to get their head out of their ass and figure out a reasonable path through this. And the default
Mhm.
position is it stays like it is. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is staying like it is kills the industry. So it's a circular argument. And I know in California, growing weeds a misdemeanor soaking wet. And in other places, they're just decriminalizing or dropping the penalties down. So the black market really doesn't have a lot of incentive not to go out there and just do what it's doing because it's a misdemeanor. So
Exactly.
this is just you're chasing your tail, and no one wants to stand still, look up, and figure out, okay, how could we reasonably tick off the boxes and make this possible? And those are discussions because we're not going to have because they want to compartmentalize each discussion. Well, it's a banking issue. No. Oh, it's a tax issue. No, it's a controlled substances issue. Schedule 3 versus D. It's like you're full of shit everywhere you look. It's just hard to
Mm-hmm.
deal with.
I couldn't agree with you
Mm,
more. I couldn't agree with you more. They cannot
mm.
get their shit together on this one. But Dale, are you familiar with Operation Choke Point?
No.
Okay, so that's a case law that they point to that Senate Republicans mainly point to in regards with safe banking, and they wanted the Operation Choke Point language to make sure that it was removed, and it is causing some contention amongst the Democrats on the side to where it could possibly tank safe banking. And I know from my time that I was on the Hill for a while too, working with the Senate Banking Committee, that the Senate Banking Chairman, that was one of his number one key points if safe banking was going to move, is that it had language in there, including the removal of Operation Choke Point.
So what is choke point?
I don't have my
Oh,
Google thing right here to do all that for you, Dale, right now.
you.
Yes.
Dale, you're in luck. I do. Operation Choke Point was an initiative of the United States Department of Justice beginning 2013,
There we
which
go.
investigated banks in the United States and businesses that they did with firearms dealers,
Yep.
payday lenders, and other companies believed to be at high risk for fraud and money laundering.
There we go. Liz Grow coming in on
Yeah,
the. Oh, yeah.
there you go, girl.
Got
Yep.
There you go.
to.
Yep. Operation
You
Choke
need your
Point.
backup.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate that.
Good.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that's the crux of it, Dale.
Well, it seems like the best laid plans don't think about the long term consequences. And so, yeah, if they could take cannabis and if they couch it as legal under state law, okay,
Mm-hmm.
which takes it out of the black market, hopefully, and allow banking of those because we have a $10,000 limit, or you've got to start doing the FISA the paperwork to get that money in the bank, and it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's a $10,000 sale in our industry is nothing. That's pocket change for moving a lot of products in and around businesses, and so banking just continues to trip us up. And if you're under the state's review for your license and you're following the rules, then what is the extra problem here with fraud? If there's a local and a state agency looking over you, it doesn't mean they won't commit that, but you're not at high risk for fraud anymore if you're under the guise of a state agency and a license.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
going clear back to the minimum mandatory problems from the 80s and 280E. The long-term consequences of a knee-jerk reaction to go after a problem, or we're left with more problems down the line. And then the arguments, oh, if we
Mm.
do this, it's going to cause that problem. Well, fuck you. Take it out of the CSA and let this be handled like alcohol and stop all this nonsense. But, you know, that's too much of an ask in these times where everyone wants to shoot each other.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Right. Right. Everyone wants to shoot each other. No one wants to agree. Everyone has the right answer. But you know, it's like we're all just fighting these like mini battles. There's no unification. It doesn't seem like there's any leadership that is reasonable or taking a reasonable approach with cannabis. I mean, certainly not here in Texas, you know. But it seems to, yeah, it seems like there are bleak times ahead with you know, cannabis.
That very, very true. I couldn't agree with you more on that, Liz. Seeming very, very bleak.